Why the citizens' legislature and citizens' line item veto are absolutely necessary for a free society. The only conceivable way to reliably counteract big money influence in Congress. The citizens' legislature and citizens' line item veto are the crown jewels of the 1984 No More platform. These two proposals complement each other. The citizens' legislature provides a forum for detailed contemplation of legislation as is supposed to be done in legislative chambers. This also will cull down the list going to the broader vote, making the process for everyone else much more manageable. On the other hand, the citizens' veto provides a broader, more cursory review as a final check against any sort of bribery or blackmail that could potentially influence any small group of people making a decision. It is hard to bribe an entire country when they can line item veto specific items out of a piece of legislation. Bribery and legal positive incentives to vote the right way. One or both of these proposals are the only ways to expunge bribery and/or blackmail from the legislative process. It would take a police state of Chinese CCP levels of proportions to meaningfully detect any and all bribery and blackmail attempts in the broadest sense. And I doubt the Chinese could even eliminate either. This is due to plausible deniability. You can bribe or blackmail someone without doing it directly. See the Why Laws Will Never Eliminate Undue Influence on Legislators video for a list of ways to influence a legislator, most of which are completely legal. People who think that you can solve the problem by just eliminating corporate contributions are naive and do not fully understand how politics actually works in practice. For example, let's say that you as a legislator see someone who always voted well for pharmaceutical companies receive very profitable board of directors positions, book deals, or speeches after leaving office, all sponsored by those same pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical company does not have to tell that legislator what he will get for voting for their legislation, they have demonstrated it in practice. And when people accuse pharmaceutical companies of influence peddling, the companies just have to say Mr. Smith is a legislator of formidable standing and experience, so his opinion and connections are valued at our company. That is plausible deniability. Bribery, when done right, is all but impossible to prove. Indeed, such carefully structured bribes in practice are perfectly legal based on how most statutes describe the crime of bribery. Blackmail and negative incentives to vote and act the right way. Similarly, you can see that certain legislators have bad things happen to them when they oppose certain legislation. Maybe corporate media starts bashing them. Maybe a well-funded opponent is inserted in his district. This happened to U.S. Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney when she refused to toe the line on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and upset a very powerful lobbying group. She was the first African-American woman from Georgia to serve in Congress. You would think she was exactly the type of person the Democratic establishment wanted to promote. But they aggressively tried to get rid of her because she did not have the right opinions. Another thing that could happen is the FBI could launch a bogus investigation into a representative or his family. This kind of stuff does happen. Ask Republican Congressman Curt Weldon about this. 3 weeks before Election Day in October 2006, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation raided his house and that of his daughter and his attorney, with the media told about it beforehand. Of course, a congressman being the target of a major federal investigation was the headlines throughout the media. What was normally covered by the legal plausible deniability influence peddling, the FBI suddenly had a problem with. He went from expecting an easy win and getting a very important chairmanship to losing the congressional race. After the damage was done, neither he or his daughter were questioned. There never was a charge or arrest. The whole raid was staged by FBI Director Robert Mueller to get him unelected. What was even worse was the whole witch hunt had a dramatic effect on Weldon's son, who went into a spiral of depression until he committed suicide a decade later. Weldon's only real crime was going toe-to-toe with the CIA director over the agencies covering up what they knew about the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden in Iran at the time. You don't question the CIA. They did not want him to become chair of the House Armed Services Committee if he won. This is what happens to legislators when government institutions become corrupt. Once other representatives see how other people like Congressman Weldon are treated, you will tend not to ruffle the wrong feathers. You don't have to directly blackmail people. Legislators cower in fear when they see what happens to their colleagues who speak truth to power. Some of these problems can be cleaned up with appropriate judicial reforms, such as grand jury stopgaps on malicious prosecutions by the state. If Agenda Item 11 were enacted, Robert Mueller and those responsible for that raid could have been fired by a citizens' committee, as there obviously no probable cause for the actions taken against the congressman. But public attacks from powerful media organizations and private investigators hired to target certain legislators can always be couched in freedom of speech and investigative reporting. Again, you always have plausible deniability. And let's face it, no one is more vulnerable to blackmail than unscrupulous political officials. Those that will lie to the public to get elected will do God knows what in their personal lives. And if even men who appear to have done nothing illegal like Weldon can become targets, no one is safe from being influenced to vote the right way. Lack of choice. The citizens' legislature and line item veto are also important to serve as a bulwark against poor and dishonest choices among politicians. How often do you find yourself voting for the lesser of two evils? Most people did not like Clinton versus Bush, Obama versus McCain, Trump versus Clinton, Trump versus Biden, and so on. If you strongly oppose crippling your economy to support one of the most corrupt puppet governments in the world, who do you vote for in Europe? Practically no candidates are talking peaceful coexistence with Russia, even though I am sure the majority of Europeans watching their energy bills going to the moon would like to see that. Are the people truly sovereign if they are not given a choice of candidates who gives them this option? If you have to vote for Vladimir the Communist or Boris the Communist, does your vote even matter? A citizen's veto solves this problem. For example, only a citizen's veto would allow citizens to cancel the sanctions before they started, giving them such a choice when the politicians of all political parties obstinately refuse to do so. You also have to deal with the fact that politicians will lie to you to get elected. Blatantly lie. Read my lips, no new taxes, type of lies. Multiple encyclopedias could be filled with all the lies politicians tell just in one country. And things are getting so bad that certain political advocacy groups have even talked openly about supporting someone in primaries pretending to be one party that are really the exact opposite as a means of taking power. Consumer product companies can be sued for fraud if they lie to get you to buy something. Do you ever wonder why we cannot sue politicians for fraud that lie like this to get elected? Oh, they make the laws. If a candidate says they are a conservative and then vote as a liberal, or vice versa, your vote has become totally worthless. You have been conned. The citizens' line item veto is the only defense the populace really has outside of referendums against such politicians. Even recalls could be too late if the damage is already done. If the politicians vote the wrong way, you can directly cancel their vote with your vote in the citizens' veto. Enhanced knowledge of laws we are supposed to obey. The final major point for the citizen veto is it better ensures that people know the laws. The reason laws were originally set up were so that the people know what they can and cannot do without being prosecuted arbitrarily. But original legal codes were brief enough so one could reasonably know the law. Now, the law is often rendered inscrutable by flowery language, and there are just too many laws. No one in this situation can possibly know everything that is legal and illegal. Even attorneys specializing in certain areas of expertise will have to do a lot of research to know what is legal and illegal. These laws often do not embody obvious questions of right versus wrong, but arbitrary decisions of power on behalf of the state. So, there is no reason to believe that people should be able to deduce them through conscience. How is an average citizen supposed to know they have to fill out this long form if they deposit $10,000 in a foreign bank account or else be sent to prison? Such laws are only there to wield overbearing and unjustifiable power over the common people. These are laws that the vast majority of citizens would never approve of if they had the right to vote on legislation. And that is just talking about statutory law. There are administrative orders that literally are made up by unelected bureaucrats that people are expected to comply with. In certain common law jurisdictions you also have to worry about case law. This is law made by the judiciary, often in direct contradiction of the written law itself. Basically, if a corrupt group of judges say that 1 + 1 = 3, then 1 + 1 = 3 even if the legislature or constitution clearly state 1 + 1 = 2. A great example of this is Wickard versus Filburn. This was a case where the government was trying to argue that a farmer who was growing wheat to feed his own farm animals was engaging in interstate commerce. There was nothing interstate about the action on his own farm. And there was no commerce since no money changed hands. The completely corrupt U.S. Supreme Court ruled that because he was using wheat that he could have sold in interstate commerce, he was indirectly affecting interstate commerce. Therefore, his activity could be governed by the national government. This was a preposterous 1 + 1 = 3 interpretation you often see from a federal judiciary gone out of control. A very basic understanding of interpreting anything is that you should not interpret a statement in such a way to make the statement clearly irrelevant. When the writers of the Constitution said that the general government had a right to regulate interstate commerce, they obviously intended it to mean interstate commerce and not interstate commerce. If the founders had wanted it to mean any commerce because it might affect interstate commerce, they would have simply said that the Congress had a right to legislate all commerce or just commerce. The very fact that they use the word interstate means it only applies to real interstate commerce regardless of secondary effects. But this case law interpretation came to be used to justify giving the central government of the United States seemingly unlimited authority to regulate in-state and interstate commerce. So, lawyers in the United States often have to pay more attention to what the courts say about the law, than to the law itself. This is one of the reasons that combining certain common law concepts with statutory law systems is a complete bastardization of the common law principles. Case law used to be determined by juries of ordinary citizens, not corruptible judges. The former led to more common sense that could be used as a guideline to future behavior. The latter is used to literally legislate from the bench. So, between all the laws, regulations under federal administrative rulings, and case law, it is nearly impossible for the ordinary citizen to keep up with what is legal and what is not legal. And case law has become so subjective given the politicization of the judiciary, that different lawyers will have different opinions on the same subject matter. In this current system, ignorance of the law is truly a justifiable defense because the laws have become so arbitrary, inscrutable, and detached from any logical moral underpinning. Think about the following scenario. Let's say that you kept to yourself and did not watch the news and social media. The government announces a lockdown through the media and social media, but you are not paying attention to it. So, you go out one day and are arrested. Is that fair? Should one be forced to read the news to know something that is completely immoral? Forcible imprisonment in homes for people who have done nothing wrong is supposed to be law? The government has a moral obligation to inform every citizen of every law in such a manner that there is a reasonable chance they know it is law. Otherwise, it is immoral to hold people accountable for such a law. By giving every citizen a vote on every law and relevant executive order, you not only give people a voice on what is happening, you inform them of what might be enacted. The mandatory 7-year sunset period will likewise ensure that people are not subjected to laws they did not know about past 80 years ago. This provision will also help to cut down all the useless laws and victimless crimes which will probably be vetoed by the public. When you combine 1. Preemptive challenge, 2. The mandatory sunset period, 3. The citizens' legislature, and 4. Citizens' line item veto, you cut down the code of rules to the most necessary ones, lawful under the charters of the nations, and written in language people can understand. This makes it more likely that people have a set of laws they are aware of and can comply with. Laws that are based on moral principles and not blindly expanding government power over the people.